At first, the late Jurassic does not look like a world of monsters. It looks like a world of patterns. Wind moving through fern fronds, shallow water sliding around stones, and morning mist lifting from a broad river valley. The ground holds the memory of last night's rain. Dark, soft soil near the water, and firmer, cracked patches only a few steps away. In this place, survival is not defined by constant violence. It is defined by timing, distance, heat, thirst, and the simple question every animal must answer: where is it safest to be right now? A low ridge overlooks the floodplain. The vegetation is a mix of conifers, cycads, and dense fields of ferns. Somewhere within that patchwork of shade and sunlight, something large is moving, slowly, carefully, without urgency. Not charging, not roaring, simply traveling. This is Allosaurus, one of the best-known large predatory dinosaurs of the late Jurassic. But today, we will not treat it as a movie villain. We will treat it as what it was: a living animal, breathing, listening, and making choices in a complex ecosystem. To find Allosaurus, we travel back around 150 million years into the late Jurassic period. Across what will one day become the western interior of North America, wide river systems spill across floodplains. Channels shift seasonally, carving new paths and abandoning old ones. Some years are wetter, some are drier. In wet periods, the valley is green and open water is common. In dry periods, water becomes concentrated, and the landscape becomes a map of risks and opportunities. Much of what we know about this time comes from a famous set of rocks called the Morrison Formation, a vast geological record that preserves the bones, trackways, and environmental clues of a thriving Jurassic community. Allosaurus is one of the stars of this record, not because it was the only predator, but because it was common enough, successful enough, to leave behind a deep fossil signature. Where it lived, it shared the environment with enormous plant eaters, armored herbivores, smaller dinosaurs, pterosaurs overhead, and reptiles in the water. Allosaurus did not rule an empty kingdom. It lived in a crowded world. In the early light, the animal steps into view. Allosaurus is built on a plan that evolution refined again and again among predatory theropods. Powerful hind legs for locomotion, a long tail for balance, and a large head at the end of a muscular neck. But the overall impression is not of a slow, dragging reptile. It is of a runner's body scaled up, an athlete's structure adapted to a heavy frame. The head is long and tall, with large openings that reduce weight while still supporting strong jaw muscles. Above the eyes, subtle bony ridges give the skull a distinct profile. These ridges are often imagined as weapons, but they may have been more important as signals, visual markers that helped individuals recognize one another or communicate status without physical conflict. The mouth is lined with sharp, curved teeth. Yet teeth alone do not define an animal's lifestyle. The story of Allosaurus is also written in its neck, its posture, and the way it moves through the landscape, often slowly, often quietly, because energy is precious and injuries are expensive. Watch the feet first. Each step is controlled. The three main toes press into the soft ground and lift again, leaving a clean, three-pronged print. The tail counters the body's forward shift, acting like a balancing pole. The torso remains remarkably steady for such a large animal, supported by muscle groups anchored to the hips and the base of the tail. This is not the movement of a creature that spends its life sprinting. In nature, sprinting is rare. Many large predators, from big cats to crocodilians, spend most of their time doing something else: waiting, traveling, scanning, and choosing. Allosaurus likely did the same. When it does accelerate, it would do so in short bursts, enough to close a gap, reposition, or escape danger, but not as a constant lifestyle. The floodplain is not a racetrack. It is a living map of obstacles. Slick mud, hidden roots, uneven stones, steep banks, and the ever-present risk of a twisted foot. A small injury could be fatal in the long run. So the most impressive adaptation may not be speed, it may be judgment. To understand Allosaurus, we have to remember that the world is not only what we see, it is what we smell, what we hear, what we feel through the ground. Along the river, the air carries layered scents: wet vegetation, decaying wood, exposed mud, and the mineral smell of stones warmed by the sun. Insects rise in clouds above certain plants. Small animals move in the understory, and their sounds travel differently depending on wind direction and humidity. Allosaurus lifts its head and holds still. That pause is not dramatic. It is practical. Predators often stop to gather information. A slight turn of the head can change the way sound arrives. A raised posture can catch a scent line that stays above the ground. The large eyes suggest vision mattered. Motion detection would be especially valuable in a landscape where tall plants create visual noise. But smell may have been equally important, not only for finding food, but for locating water, detecting other large animals, and recognizing whether an area is safe. In this ecosystem, information is survival. Now widen the view. In the distance, a group of sauropods, long-necked plant eaters, moves in a slow procession. Their footfalls compress the ground, leaving deep impressions that will fill with water and, in some places, preserve into stone. They browse at different heights, turning the forest edge into a living gradient of feeding levels. Closer to the river, stegosaurs move through fern fields. Their plates catch the sunlight, and their spiked tails are not ornaments. They are serious defenses, effective enough that any predator would think twice before approaching. Above, pterosaurs circle on warm air currents, occasionally dropping lower to follow the river's bends. In the water, reptiles slip from shadow to shadow. Small dinosaurs and other animals occupy the in-between spaces, feeding, hiding, and migrating through the day. Allosaurus moves among all of this, an apex predator in some contexts, but not an invincible tyrant. The ecosystem does not revolve around it. It navigates the ecosystem like everything else does, by balancing risk and reward. Allosaurus was a carnivore. That is clear. But carnivory does not mean constant violent scenes, and it does not mean every meal required a dangerous confrontation. In modern ecosystems, large predators often take advantage of opportunity. They may hunt when conditions are right, but they also scavenge when a safe, energy-rich resource appears. This is not weakness, it is efficiency. A river valley creates many non-violent feeding opportunities. Animals can die from drought, from accidents in mud, from disease, from storms, or from old age. Seasonal floods can trap or injure large herbivores. Even without any predator present, the landscape itself can be dangerous. Allosaurus would have benefited from a flexible strategy: investigate scents, track movement, and make decisions that reduce injury risk. Because the true enemy of a large predator is often not hunger in a single day. It is a broken tooth, a sprained ankle, or an infected wound that makes future days impossible. If Allosaurus hunted, much of the process would be invisible to a casual observer. It would begin with noticing. A change in the soundscape, a sudden stillness among smaller animals, the scent of a herd carried by the wind, the faint tremor of many heavy bodies moving together. Then comes assessment. Is the target healthy? Is it protected? Are there defensive adults nearby? Is the ground stable enough for acceleration? Could an approach be blocked by dense vegetation? Is there another Allosaurus in the area? One that might compete for the same opportunity? Sometimes the best choice is to do nothing. It may sound strange, but walking away is one of the most successful behaviors in nature. Predators that attempt every possible attack pay a price. Predators that choose carefully survive longer. So we imagine Allosaurus not as a permanent attacker, but as a patient evaluator, traveling parallel to a herd at a distance, pausing often, and leaving when the odds are wrong. One of the most debated questions about Allosaurus is whether it was social. In some fossil sites, many Allosaurus bones occur together. That could mean many things: repeated deposition over time, a natural trap, a drought-driven gathering of water, or a feeding site that drew individuals in. Even in modern animals, social behavior is not a simple yes or no. Some predators are solitary most of the time, but tolerate others when resources are abundant. Some form temporary groups. Some gather without cooperating, simply because the environment pushes them into the same place. Allosaurus may have behaved similarly. If two individuals meet, their first goal is likely to avoid injury. That can be done through posture, distance, and display. A raised head, a sideways stance, a slow, deliberate walk. These can communicate confidence or caution without contact. In our scene, an Allosaurus appears at the edge of the river corridor. Another is already there, drinking. The newcomer does not rush in. It slows, angles its body, and watches. The resident lifts its head. The two hold distance. The moment is tense only if we project drama onto it. In reality, it is an ordinary negotiation between animals that understand the cost of fighting. After a time, one steps aside. The other drinks. The valley returns to its steady rhythm. A juvenile Allosaurus would not have lived the same life as an adult. Younger individuals, smaller and lighter, could move differently. They might be more agile in dense vegetation and might focus on smaller prey or opportunistic feeding, reducing competition with adults. Their risk profile is different. They are more vulnerable to many dangers, but they also require less food each day. Adults, in contrast, are powerful but expensive to maintain. They need more energy and must protect their mobility. For an adult, a major injury is catastrophic. This creates a natural division of roles across ages. It is common in modern ecosystems as well. Young predators practice, explore, and learn landscapes, while adults become specialists in patience and efficiency. We can picture a juvenile moving along the edge of fern cover, pausing to investigate sounds, then retreating. Not fleeing in terror, simply staying cautious, because caution is a survival skill learned early. The river valley is not the same every day. In a wet season, water is everywhere. The floodplain is soft. Plants grow rapidly. Herbivores disperse into broader feeding territories. Predators must travel farther to find opportunity, but they also face fewer conflicts at scarce water sources. In a dry season, everything compresses toward the river. Trails become deeper. Dust rises with every step. The remaining pools attract many species, and the density of animals increases. With density comes information. More tracks, more scents, more sounds, but also more risk, because more large animals in one place means more unpredictable movement. Allosaurus adapts by shifting its schedule, moving more in cooler hours, staying near shade during heat, choosing routes that minimize exposure and maximize footing. The documentary lens reveals this as a pattern, not a plot. Fossils sometimes preserve signs of trauma: healed injuries, damaged bones that repaired over time, teeth that broke and were replaced. These details matter because they speak to the real life of the animal. Not a perfect predator, but a survivor that experienced setbacks and continued. A healed rib suggests pain endured and survived. A damaged toe indicates the risks of moving through unstable ground. A broken tooth tells us that feeding could be mechanically challenging, that hard stresses existed, and that Allosaurus had to continue functioning even when not at its best. In our reconstruction, we may notice subtle scarring on the skin, a slightly cautious placement of a foot, a moment of resting in shade. These are not cinematic flourishes. They are realistic possibilities for a large, wild animal. Let's follow one Allosaurus through a full day, quietly, respectfully, without dramatizing. Morning. The air is cool. Mist clings to low areas near water. Allosaurus emerges from the shelter of conifers and approaches the river. It drinks, deep, steady pulls. Then it lifts its head, water dripping from the lower jaw, and pauses to listen. Midday. Heat builds. Insects become more active. Many large animals reduce movement. Allosaurus moves into partial shade and stands still, conserving energy. It is not sleeping. It is waiting, resting without losing awareness. Afternoon. A distant herd passes. The ground vibrates softly. Allosaurus turns its head, takes a few steps to maintain a better view, then stops again. The herd is large and well defended. The predator does not approach. Evening. The air cools. The light becomes golden. Allosaurus resumes travel along the river corridor, moving on firmer soil where the footing is safer. It crosses a shallow stream with measured steps, then shakes water from its limbs and tail. Night. The valley shifts into a different soundscape. Insects dominate. The stars are bright. Allosaurus moves again, slow, deliberate, using the cool hours. Somewhere nearby, another large animal calls. Allosaurus pauses, then chooses a route that keeps it near cover and close to water. At no point in this day is violence required to show the animal's reality. Its reality is the steady work of living. Allosaurus is a dinosaur we know well, not because we have perfect knowledge, but because multiple lines of evidence come together. Bones tell us about size, posture, and muscle attachment. They preserve the architecture of movement. Trackways tell us where animals walked, sometimes how fast, sometimes whether they moved alone or in groups, and how the ground conditions changed. Geological context tells us about rivers, floods, droughts, and habitats. Sediments can record a quiet pond or a violent flood. Plant fossils can suggest what grew there. The distribution of fossils can hint at seasonal congregation points. Paleontology is often imagined as a collection of dramatic skeletons, but it is more like detective work in slow motion. Each fossil is a clue. Each layer of rock is a page, and the story emerges from patterns, not from a single spectacular moment. Allosaurus has been portrayed in countless books and films as a constant killing machine. But real predators are not defined by a single behavior. They are defined by long-term success. Allosaurus succeeded because it fit its environment, because it moved well enough, sensed well enough, and made good enough decisions to survive through seasons, competition, and the hazards of a river valley. Its life included hunger and abundance, calm and tension, travel and rest. It likely experienced injuries and recovery. It probably encountered rivals and avoided conflict as often as possible. And it lived surrounded by massive herbivores that shaped the landscape simply by existing. If we want a true documentary view of Allosaurus, we should focus on what documentaries do best: patient observation, ecological context, and respect for the animal as an animal. Late in the day, the light fades and the river becomes a ribbon of dark reflection. Allosaurus walks along the edge of the floodplain. Each step presses into damp clay. Each footprint fills slowly with water. In most places, rain and time will erase them, but somewhere, just a few meters of ground, in just the right conditions, those impressions will dry, then be covered by new sediment, and then be buried deeper as the world changes. Over millions of years, they will become stone. And long after Allosaurus is gone, those tracks will remain. Not as a symbol of horror, but as evidence of a living animal that once walked here, quietly, carefully, beside a Jurassic river. And that is the real wonder of Allosaurus. Not the myth, but the reality, preserved in Earth itself.